In recent international discussions, some analysts have argued that Russia is not acting in isolation, but is instead responding to what they describe as a changing set of global rules shaped largely by the actions of the United States and its allies over the past several decades. According to this view, major powers have increasingly relied on military influence, economic sanctions, and political pressure to protect their interests. And this has gradually become an accepted part of how global politics operates. Supporters of this argument say that, when powerful countries use force or coercive measures to achieve strategic goals, it sends a message to the rest of the world that strength and influence matter more than cooperation and international agreements. As a result, other nations may feel justified in using similar methods when they believe their own security or regional influence is at stake. From this perspective, Russia's actions are seen by some commentators not as a sudden change in behavior, but as a continuation of a global trend in which competition between major powers has become more direct and more confrontational. This argument does not excuse or justify any specific actions, but it suggests that the international system itself has shifted toward a more competitive and less cooperative environment. Analysts who support this view believe that understanding this broader context is important for explaining why tensions between major powers continue to grow and why diplomatic solutions have become more difficult to achieve. Those who argue that Russia is playing by the new rules often point to past international actions led by the United States and its allies as examples of how global norms have shifted. They refer to military interventions, regime change efforts, and the frequent use of economic sanctions as tools of foreign policy that have become more common over time. In their view, these actions signaled that powerful nations are willing to bypass traditional diplomatic processes when they believe their strategic interests are threatened. As these practices became more frequent, the idea that international law alone could restrain major powers began to weaken. Some analysts say that this environment encourages countries like Russia to act more boldly in their own regions, believing that global responses will be limited or inconsistent. They also argue that selective enforcement of international rules creates frustration and mistrust, especially when similar actions are judged differently, depending on which country is responsible. This perceived double standard, they say, reduces confidence in global institutions and increases the likelihood that nations will rely on power rather than cooperation to achieve their goals. From this standpoint, rising tensions are seen as part of a broader breakdown in the international system rather than the result of any single decision or event. At the same time, many experts strongly disagree with the idea that global power shifts fully explain Russia's behavior, and they emphasize that each country remains responsible for its own choices. These analysts argue that even if international norms have weakened, that does not remove the obligation to respect national borders, civilian safety, and international agreements. They point out that many countries face security challenges, but still choose to pursue diplomacy and negotiation rather than military force. From this perspective, blaming global trends alone risks ignoring the role of leadership decisions, domestic politics, and long-term strategic goals. Critics of the new rules argument also warn that accepting this logic could create a dangerous cycle, where one country's actions justify another's, leading to continuous escalation. Instead, they stress the importance of accountability and the need for stronger international cooperation to prevent conflicts from spreading. While acknowledging that global politics has become more competitive, these experts maintain that normalizing aggressive behavior only makes future crises more likely and reduces the chances for peaceful solutions. Another important part of this debate focuses on how smaller countries and regional organizations are affected when major powers compete more aggressively. When powerful nations treat influence and control as primary goals, smaller states may feel pressured to choose sides or adjust their policies to avoid economic or political punishment. Analysts note that this can weaken regional cooperation and increase instability, especially in areas already facing economic or security challenges. In Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and parts of the Middle East, shifting alliances and security concerns have created uncertainty about long-term peace and development. Some observers warn that continued rivalry between large powers could divide the world into competing blocs. making international cooperation on issues like climate change, health, and trade much more difficult. In this environment, trust between nations becomes harder to build, and global institutions may struggle to remain effective. As competition increases, the risk of misunderstandings and miscalculations also grows, raising concerns about unintended conflicts that could escalate beyond regional boundaries. In the end, the argument that Russia is simply following new rules set by powerful nations reflects a deeper concern about the future of the international order. While some analysts believe that shifting global behavior has encouraged more aggressive actions, others insist that lasting stability can only come from strengthening diplomacy, international law, and mutual accountability. The ongoing debate highlights how difficult it has become to balance national interests with global responsibility in an increasingly divided world. Many experts agree that without renewed efforts to rebuild trust and reinforce global cooperation, conflicts are likely to continue and may even intensify. For policymakers, the challenge is not only responding to immediate crises, but also addressing the long-term systems that shape how nations interact, whether through reforming international institutions, promoting dialogue, or reducing reliance on force. Analysts say meaningful change will require cooperation from all major powers. Ultimately, the choices made today will shape whether future global relations are driven by competition and confrontation or by cooperation and shared security.